All right, 7:02, and you are live.
Okay. Well, I have a gavel, and the January 18th meeting of the Common Council is called to order, but before we call the roll, Carrie, let's share a short video. And right hand up, and repeat after me. I, Emily Falco,
I, Emily Falco,
do solemnly swear
that
I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Charter of the City of Oneonta,
the Charter of the City of Oneonta,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of the 8th Ward Council Member
of the office of the 8th Ward Council Member,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So with that, congratulations to Emily Falco, representing the 8th Ward, the newest member of the City of Oneonta Common Council. And Carrie, will you call the roll?
Thank you.
Mayor Drenick,
Here.
Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Davies,
Here.
Councilmember Risberger,
Here.
Councilmember Lepari-Shu,
Here.
Councilmember Carson,
Here.
Councilmember Harrington,
Here.
Councilmember Rafter,
Here.
and Councilmember Falco.
Here.
Great. And then with that, let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
and to the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
Thank you much. And with that, we are graced by the presence, I believe, on Zoom. I see Danielle's name there. And Danielle, are you representing SUNY by yourself, or do you have Dr. Cardehe with you?
I believe it is just me this evening.
Well, you have the
I'm
floor.
sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And you have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. So I just wanted to come and give a quick update just as to where we are at with our spring reopening. Currently, we are requiring that all students who are eligible to receive the booster get their booster prior to coming back to campus. And for those who are eligible upon or after their return to campus, they will have a limited amount of time to get the booster. So we're hoping to get close to last semester's vaccination rate of 96%. So we're in a good place moving forward on that. We are requiring reentry testing for all off-campus and residential students who are returning to campus. So any student who comes back to campus within 5 days must provide proof of a negative test. And for those students who are using rapid over-the-counter tests, we are requiring that students they submit those tests within 48 hours upon their arrival to campus. So we're in the process of moving forward with a lot of those pieces. Some of our athletes have returned. A number of our residents, our RAs, have returned. So we're gearing up for this weekend, which will be the larger push of students and transfers returning to campus. And we are ready for our start of January 26th next week. I wanted to thank both the city and the county just for their continued partnership. The community testing site has been pretty busy. Last I checked, all of these slots have been going pretty quickly on a day-to-day basis. And we are currently working with Quadrant on the possibility of expanding our community testing site hours. So I'll hopefully have more information about that towards the end of this week. But, we've definitely seen a demand, and if that's something that we can help meet with the usage of our facilities, we would definitely like to do so. Additionally, I wanted to thank Heidi Bond and her team for working with us on setting up a booster clinic on our campus. So we will have a clinic January 24th and January 31st, both for students, staff, and faculty on campus. So just huge thanks to all of the work that their team is doing. I know that things are very hectic and crazy for them right now, but we really appreciate it. And again, appreciate the continued partnership of both our city and county partners. Mayor Jarnick, I figured I would give that quick overview and then kick it back to you to see if there are any questions.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Danielle. Do we have any questions from council? Katie?
Hi, thanks for that update. I am passing along a question from a constituent, and I apologize if I just misunderstood if this was somewhere in your report there. But with regard to testing students throughout the semester, is there a plan for that? Did you already address that? If so, I apologize.
No, you're totally fine. So there is a plan for that. So we are going to, one of the things that we're really focusing on is a boost, test, mask campaign. So we're working on the boosting piece. And part of the testing piece is not only having those requirements that we had last semester for testing on campus. So all exempted students and unvaccinated students will be required to test weekly.
Okay.
And we are also, we're screening unvaccinated students weekly. And for our vaccinated and boosted population, we are going to continue to surveillance test those folks at a clip of about 7%. On a weekly basis. So we were able to cycle through actually 100% of our population before the end of last semester. So we can probably make it through the entirety of our vaccinated and boosted population this semester. We're also going to be doing wastewater testing twice weekly. So we think this will be a great opportunity for us to continue with that. Additionally, with the community testing site on campus, there's also going to be additional testing available to students, not only students, but members of the community as well. So we are looking to continue the testing program, not only continue the testing program from last semester, but to bolster it with additional testing capacity.
Awesome,
Great.
thank you. And just a quick follow-up question. When you say the entirety of the student population, is that residents of campus and off campus?
Yep,
Okay, cool. Thanks.
of course.
Any other questions from council? No questions. So I thank you very much, Danielle, and appreciate these reports every time we can get you here.
Of course, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. And what I want to do now, if you don't mind, Mark Davies, I'm going to call on you before we get into our petitioners and public hearings to provide us with the city health officer's report. Diane, I believe, is in transit from Oregon.
Sure thing, Mark. Just pull open. So I'm going to read directly from a report that the doctor sent out just before this meeting, and probably can't answer your questions. COVID cases continue to increase at record highs in the U.S. While some areas, including the Northeast, have begun to experience a sharp decline in cases predicted due to the Omicron variant, most of the decrease in cases in New York is being driven by the New York City metropolitan area. Hospitalizations and deaths continue to increase both nationwide and in New York State. New York State data through January 3rd shows that unvaccinated are 8 times as likely to be hospitalized. The county and region continue to see rising cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. During the first 2 weeks of January, the county saw 1,633 cases, exceeding the total number of December, which was 1,475. That's worth repeating. So all the cases in December are less than the cases for the first 2 weeks in January. According to the New York State Department of Health website, our 7-day average positivity is 16.8%. The county reported an additional death this afternoon, and hospitalizations are at 8. There have been 4 reported deaths in the last 2 weeks, and again, now 5, with the hospitalization last reported at 8. The county health department is in the process of revising its data page. Harvard College website yesterday reported 39 active cases, a decrease from 44 1 week ago. These represent students who returned earlier this month and were identified by surveillance testing. The SUNY tracker indicated that there are 3 active cases at present, with students due to return to campus next week, as you heard from Danielle McMullen. Testing sites for the general public in Milford and on the SUNY campus are up and running. Link to the testing site is on the city's social media and will be added to the website. Beginning tomorrow, all Americans will be able to order up to 4 free at-home COVID tests through the website covidtest.gov. The CDC has replaced the term fully vaccinated with up to date on vaccines, which reflects that someone who is eligible has received a booster. Isolation and quarantine guidelines from the CDC, as well as here in Otsego County, will vary depending on this status. The county health department now has a link on its website for isolation and quarantine information. On January 14th, the CDC updated its guidance regarding masks, taking into account that N95 respirators and KN95 masks are more protective than cloth or surgical masks, and advising individuals to, quote, wear the most protective mask you can, end quote, when in high risk settings. And that is a report according to the doctor.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Mark. And I don't know that Mark is here to take questions, but I just want to reference again the great work that we've started with our Community Wellness Committee, Mark chairing that. So it seemed an appropriate assignment to have him read Diane Jorgensen's report. So with that, thank you very much, Mark. And I want to move on to our petitioners and public hearings. And our first is a public hearing before the mayor to receive comments on a local law amending certain provisions of City Oneonta Municipal Code, Chapter 300, as they pertain to definitions and zoning districts established MU1 Downtown Mixed Use District. And Carrie, do we have anyone to speak?
Only have one petitioner in the waiting room. That is David Hayes. I don't believe he's here to comment on that particular item, but I'm admitting him just in case.
I think that's a great idea. And David, if you can hear us, if you are commenting on this particular item, let us know in some fashion.
I just hopped on. Actually, I'm petitioning. I'm not commenting on an item. I just have a few quick comments to the council. So I'm not commenting on an item.
All right, that's fine. David, let me move on to the second public hearing, and then we'll
That's great.
Entertain your.
I'll stand by. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you very much, David. So, Carrie, then as we hear that there is no public comment, I guess we'll close that public hearing.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to the second public hearing before the mayor to receive comments on local law amending Article 3 of the City of Oneonta Charter regarding residency requirements for members of the city's boards and commissions. And I presume, as David is not here to comment on that, and you've nobody else in the waiting room, Carrie?
No one else in the waiting room.
Okay, in that case, I would say that there's going to be no comment on that from the public, and we will close that public hearing. And David, thank you very much for your patience, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, and I'll be brief. It's not a petition, it's just a couple of quick personal comments. One, I'd like to personally endorse Emily Falco, your newest council member. This is a bright young woman who has served on the First Night Board, as many of you know I serve on as well. She's just a fountain of ideas. And so I'd like to personally endorse her. Point number 2 related is that as the council members make decisions and policy decisions, especially in the next year or so, keep in mind our young people, especially ways to attract and retain bright young people. And if you want any kind of inspiration as to the kind of bright young people would like to attract, look at commissioners in Ward 8 and Ward 1, Luke Murphy and Emily Falco. These are some of our best We need to get more young people like this to keep this place vital and lively and optimistic. So that's it. I just want to give you some suggestions as you set policy moving forward.
Well, thank you, David, but a shout out to Katie Lepori-Shu, who I think also qualifies as a young voice on council and one that we have come to count on. So thank you very much, David.
And I'll let you guys go. Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
care.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
second
David.
that for Katie.
All right. With that, we'll move on to boards and commission reports, and we'll start with the Housing Commission. Do we have somebody here?
Yes, that'd be me. Sorry. I guess I'm getting old. I guess I don't classify young anymore. Housing Commission.
It's a slippery slope, Scott.
Met January 5th at 7 o'clock. We had a very good presentation from the Greater Mohawk Valley Land Bank. Mark, Mayor Drenick, I think you've put it on a couple of your videos, and I believe it's on the city website for anybody that needs help from COVID for, and I know I'm going to botch this, for water sewer, being behind on water sewer so that they're able to pay bills. So if you got anybody in your wards that might need some help funding wise from problems with COVID, please send them to our city website. Have them click on. They will. You can reach out to the Greater Mohawk Valley Land Bank as well, and they will make contact with you. And we did discuss other things, but here's where my comment comes in. I left my notes at home, so I don't have them in front of me, so I apologize for that. But there is one thing that I will be bringing up. I'm just going to bring up now is, and I kind of need the council's help. And I've been reached by some people in the community, and I've taken a couple phone calls that they are a little concerned with the way in the direction that the Housing Commission is going. They're afraid that they're focusing on just one type of housing, which is the lower income, and that they're not focusing as what we were hoping to be going through to middle to represent all the housing. So I just, as a liaison, I didn't know really where to bring this up, and that's why I kind of just brought it up here for the council, as I need some help as we go back into the next meeting on direction you'd like to see the Housing Commission take.
Questions, comments for Scott? Dave Risberger?
Well, I mean, we all might have our concerns about, not only that board, but, any board or commission, but really those commissions, Scott, in my opinion, should be working independently. Ultimately, whatever they decide, it's got to be filtered back through council anyway. So for me personally, I just want to hear what they have to say when the time comes and see what they come up with. And I know that we need housing at every socioeconomic level, not just low income, not just middle income, not high income. It's all of them. So even if they're focusing a little bit more on one over others, I mean, I'm just glad something's being done, but I would reserve judgment until they bring something forward.
Other comments, other questions for Scott?
Luke, I think.
Luke, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Luke?
That's okay. Yes, I've been doing some research, Scott, on the needs assessment put out by Bassett as part of the Wellness Commission, and I totally understand that there's many socioeconomic classes in the city. I read one particularly startling statistic that over 80 students attending Oneonta schools are at some level of homelessness, and there's a massive problem, as we all know. with homelessness in the city, and I think that it should be a top concern of the Housing Commission. Perhaps not their sole concern. Like you said, there are other folks in the city. It was just a very startling statistic I read. Knew it was high, but didn't know the exact number. So it's a real problem.
John, is that your hand up?
Yeah, it is.
John?
My apologies to Dave Risberger. I once commented that there was a direction for that committee that was very lengthy and specific, but I think that in hindsight, that the mandate for that committee was very extensive and laid down several areas where we were seeking study and advice and ideas about that. So it might be something, Scott, to refer the committee back to the mandate and consider whether they're covering the waterfront. It's also rather a new committee, is still getting its feet on the ground. But I do think that legislation that we passed gives a very specific set of areas that we wanted to seek advice on. So that's my advice about aligning the committee.
Thank you, John.
So-
Len?
I would like to concur with John. There was a lengthy direction that was written. I think Councilmember Mark Davies was the author of that, and I want to thank him for doing that. But there was a direction for that committee, for the commission, sorry, to be going down. And so, Scott, if you feel that they're not kind of following that roadmap, then please have them look at it again and address that issue at the next meeting, because time is precious with this commission. I think we all expect and we all have high expectations from them.
Any other comments or questions for Scott? All right, thank you very much, Scott. So we'll move on to the Board of Public Service. And although she hadn't been sworn in at the time, she still sat in and audited the Board of Public Service meetings. So Councilmember Falco.
Okay, yes, I do have my notes here somewhere. Oh, I printed them. That's right. I'm kind of a paper person. So the board met on Thursday, January 6th via Zoom, and everyone was in attendance. It started with 8 Cozy Avenue. The property owner was there, but the property manager had a health issue, so they postponed that application. Then 39 West Street, it was a return from December. They were appealing their blighted property fee, but the board ended up deciding that there was insufficient progress and denied the appeal. Then 348 Chestnut Street, it was also an appeal for a blighted property fee. That gentleman had several setbacks, which had delayed progress on repairs to his home. But despite that, he did show some progress. He had replaced a staircase and a porch that was kind of dangerous. So they felt that because he had done some work and due to these setbacks, they gave him the condition that if he entered into a new restoration agreement that would be signed right away and got all the property work done by December of this year, that they granted his appeal with that condition. Okay, and then we had 12 Mosher Ave. That ended up being declared an unsafe property. I guess there were several complaints about it, and there was someone living on the premises that really shouldn't have been there. So now, hopefully, that property owner will be able to evict that person and get it fixed up. So it can. So it was ordered vacated within 30 days, and it's not to be reoccupied until a valid certificate of occupancy is issued by code. And then lastly, 214 Chestnut Street. was initially appearing to request an unsafe declaration, but then they withdrew their application because it ended up being about something else that didn't affect the board. And that was it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Council? All good? All right, very good. Councilmember Falco, thank you very much. And moving on to the Environmental Board, and I believe that's Councilmember Davies.
Thanks, Mayor Drenick. The Environmental Board met last Tuesday, January 11th, and their committees reported several things. So the Urban Forest Committee talked about the woolly allegid infestation is beginning to impact the hemlocks in the city. So this is an invasive species, and they are asking the public to be on the lookout for the woolly allegid. You can go to the Environmental Board's Facebook page to get an idea of what they look like and where to look for them. Apparently, there's several stands of hemlocks in Wilbur Park and perhaps some others elsewhere. Public Spaces Committee continues to work on a kind of naming some of the unnamed creeks within Oneana, and reported some of the progress they've been making in terms of having some conversations with teachers initially to see if there's any interest there, and this perhaps being a project that might be adopted by schools to begin looking at names. There's also a long conversation about the deers, and it was decided that they'll be trying to invite a DEC expert to the next meeting to talk about the scope of the deer problem and what other municipalities have done in light of deer issues. And then lastly, they reported that several of the Environmental Board members had a meeting with city staff to discuss procurement practices as well as kind of greening the city in general. And they were very appreciated very much the opportunity to meet with the city staff and the opportunity to work more closely with city staff. So kudos to our city staff. I believe that was City Administrator Mattice. I'm not sure who else was at that meeting, but they were very appreciative of the opportunity to have some really good dialogue in conjunction with the city staff about how to move forward in terms of greening procurement practices and just greening in general. And that's my report.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Any comments, any questions for Mark? Okay, very good. In that case, we'll move on to the Public Arts Commission. That would be Council Member Lapari Shu.
Yep. So Public Arts met via Zoom last Wednesday, the 12th. It was a pretty brief meeting, but we covered 4 agenda topics. So the big exciting news is that the Ford Sales Building mural project has been awarded to James McElroy, who is a local artist. We had 2 respondents total. James was one of them. The other was from Albany, and they're both really talented, and we're hoping to use the other respondent in a future project, but they thought that ultimately going with a talented, committed local artist first was the way to go. So congratulations to James. And that should be completed by March. I've forgotten the date off the top of my head, but like mid-March. So we should be seeing that going up pretty soon, which is exciting. We discussed something that actually I brought up to the chair, Chair Maloney, that is kind of art adjacent. That's so the commission discussed it. It's Telephones of the Wind project, which is where basically a disconnected telephone is placed in kind of a natural wooded area for folks who are grieving to be able to connect with their loved ones. CBS Sunday Morning recently did a feature on it. If anybody's curious about that, the original one is in Japan, but they've since kind of taken off. There's one in Appalachian State Park. So it was sort of a preliminary conversation because, sorry, my cat. Okay. It was sort of a preliminary conversation because I wasn't really sure. I'm trying to help a constituent with a path forward for that. But we talked a little bit about design and maybe coming up with some plans for that to come back to the next meeting. So we discussed location, COVID precautions, and aesthetic ideas. That was in my notes. Well put, Katie. All right. We discussed the master plan, the public art master plan. They have been they admitted that they're sort of dragging their feet on that a little bit. So I think that that'll be coming forward in the next couple of meetings, because they kind of put that back on their radar and are going to work more earnestly on that. And then actually I was a few minutes late and they had already gone over an agenda item, which was about the one of the things that's sort of floating around on the public art plan is painting utility boxes. And someone had mentioned that they connected with someone in California who had done that as a project before, and that they did a vinyl wrap rather than painting directly on the boxes. And so that was just a quick sort of FYI discussion of new information there. The meeting was only about 25 minutes long, so that's everything that was covered.
Thank you, Katie. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Katie? So, okay, so I have a question, Katie. Does James have a theme?
I can share with you the conceptual sketches, but we don't have a final design yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he'll do something that's spectacular. There's no question about that.
Sure, he's very.
I'm excited to see it. All right. Well, if there are no further questions or comments on the Public Arts Commission, we'll move to committee reports, and we'll start with the Legislative Committee. John? John, you're muted.
I'm on now. The committee met on Monday, January 13. We only had two topics on the agenda. One was had to do with the plumbing code update, and the notion there was the plumbing board wanted to get clarification or make a statement that following the passing of the plumbing examination that's necessary to be certified in Oneonta, there would be and I think this is right, Luke, you can help me with it, 90 days they have to sign.
Yeah, I believe so. I think it was 90 days or 3 months. I can't remember which, but it's in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
90 days to sign. And the notion that should someone not be able to sign within the 90-day period, there would be some sort of accommodation that could be made if there's a justifiable and pressing reason for that not happening. There was a couple of things that were listed there, but I think that rather than list the specifics, the person could come and ask if there would be some forgiveness granted. Again, there'd be again, unspecified time that could be delayed, but certainly not terribly long, because 90 days is a fairly good period to expect that someone would come and sign to be a plumber. And the other thing that came up was a discussion about driveway apron maintenance. This has happened in my own experience. There are some people who have, in my ward, said they thought that the city should be responsible for maintaining the bottom areas where their driveway meets the street. But I think the practices in the city have been that we do not fix or update anybody's aprons unless we've damaged them doing other work. So there was some talk about how that could be codified, and the decision that was recommended was that that it didn't need to be codified, that we don't do that, we never have, and that would be enough explanation. We don't have to put it into the code that we do not repair people's driveways. So those were the two items that came up, and I think they were reasonably handled.
Great. Comments, questions for John and the Legislative Committee? No questions, no comments. So with that, we'll move to Finance and Human Resources Committee, and that's you, Lynn.
Hey, Mayor, we met January 10th. And I believe items 3 through 14 on tonight's agenda were items that were of consent by the Finance Committee. And I will take on any questions.
Any questions for Finance, for Lynn specifically, relative to 3 through 14 on our agenda? No. Cruising right along. Well, thank you very much, Len. And with that, I muted myself, but with that, we will go to the administrator's report. Greg?
Thanks, Mayor. A few updates. As everyone's probably aware, there was a fire at Motel 88 on January 6th that the City Fire Department responded to. Chief Knapp wanted to share that he was very happy with the staff's performance. Fire was growing rapidly when they arrived on site. Their quick action was able to prevent further damage. There was some property damage to one of the motel rooms. There were no injuries, and the cause of the fire has been classified as suspicious, but it's still under investigation. The Newell Park sanitary sewer main replacement project started this week, just yesterday, I believe. PSA was issued about that. That work should take.
Contact Emily Falco.
And final restoration will be done in the spring. That'll be a new sanitary main along David Brenner Drive in Newell Park, and also along the mill race on the other side of the mill race, between the mill race and the railroad tracks. It shouldn't affect any traffic in the park. There will be some signage and barriers put up. So people should be cautious in that area. We did want to mention that if you're going to the dog park, you should plan to park over by the large pavilion playground area and walk over from there, as opposed to trying to access the parking lot by the skate park. That won't be accessible anymore. As I think Scott mentioned in his report from one of the committees or commissions, Housing Commission, the New York State Homeowner Assistance Fund is the fund that's available through the end of this month or until funds run out, whichever comes first. This is a program that will help homeowners who are struggling to pay housing payments, such as mortgage payments, property tax payments, water and sewer bills. Applications are open. Homeowners should apply immediately at the nyhomeownerfund.org. I'm not sure if we've already issued a PSA about that, Carrie. If not, we certainly plan to, and we'll share it on our city website. Ginny had reported that the November sales tax numbers came in at $584,000, which is $72,000 higher, or 14% higher than 2020. Year to date through November 2021 was at 5.14 million, which is overall 21% higher than 2020 and 11% higher than 2019. So obviously that's a good trend. December sales tax payment will be received in February for 2021. OPT route changes that we discussed a few meetings back took effect Monday this week. The River Street and West End routes, if you remember, were consolidated into a single route, and the East End route was incorporated into the Cooperstown route. Dave Hoteling reports a few minor complaints were received and resolved just with some clarifying information. There haven't been any major issues at all, and the drivers are relieved to not have to pick up as many extra shifts since they've been working quite a bit extra for the last year plus. As an aside, we're still looking for part-time bus drivers. Applications on the city website. Overall, these changes will save an estimated 3,700 part-time driver hours over the course of a year and amount to approximately $50,000 net savings annually without any real substantial reduction in service. Other employment opportunities currently, we have an engineering GIS technician position that is vacant. We recently announced an exam for firefighters. You can find information on these positions on the city website. And those are the updates I wanted to share. Does anyone have any questions about those or anything else?
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. Before I open up the floor to questions, I just want to You referenced the dog park. We've now had our 6 inches of snow, so I would presume that the larger dog park area is closed. The smaller one is still open?
That's correct. Thanks, Mark. I believe a PSA will go out. They hadn't already. Large dog area is closed for the season. The small dog area, you can bring large and small dogs in there.
Very good. Good. Anybody have any questions or comments for the city administrator? Scott.
Thanks. Greg, I just want to do this up front because too many times our meetings go long and I think people when we get to the end, don't really hear thank yous enough. And I know with our first snowstorm, our DPW with our new department heads in place and many new staff members and stuff, I just want to give a quick thank you to them. And I also quick thank you to OPD and OFD for their response down in the 6th Ward when the tree came down on top of the power lines. And to see DPW, OPD, and OFD work real close together for traffic control and stuff in the middle of a snowstorm, it's very much appreciated. And the residents took notice down there and they were very appreciative of everything that was done by all 3 departments.
Thanks, Scott. It's good to hear. I'll be sure to pass that along if they didn't hear it tonight.
Right. Dave Risberger.
Yes, first I'd like to repeat what Scott just said about the plowing. I want to thank you and your crew for the good job that you did. Something I did hear on the news that I don't know if you've heard about this or not, but I believe it was Syracuse has tracking software on their plows, so people actually can look at their phone and use software to see where the plows have gone in the city. Is that something you've heard about or would consider looking into? Because it's I think it might alleviate some anxiety some people have when we have a lot of snow dumped and they see their road and they see that nobody's been there yet to plow, even though I know our plows are out everywhere working very hard. They just haven't hit every aspect of the city just yet.
Yeah, I have heard of that. I think they might even be naming their plows, if I remember right. That was
really?
Plows started in Scotland. They had like elementary school students come up with funny names for plows. That's something we can look into. I can take a look at that with Chris Yacobucci. We can see if that's something maybe in the future we can implement. We don't have that capability now. We can track our plows internally, but it's not something that's built for a public facing portal, but it's an idea we can look at for sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments for the city administrator? Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much, Greg. And with that, we move to the mayor's remarks. That's me. And these are prepared comments. 40 miles of roadway, 10 separate plow routes, 3 salt routes, 13 employees on the routes, 3 shifts from 3 a.m. to 9 p.m. And as has been noted here, all the streets have been cleared of snow. So congratulations and thanks to Greg Mattice, our city administrator, Chris Yacobucci, John Williams, and the DPW crew on a job well done. Maintaining the roads and keeping us safe and secure, these are among the deliveries of service that inspired our forebears to incorporate Oneonta as a city. These are the expectations of a city government, and they are reasonable. But in my opinion, over many years, we have come to expect too much from the city, assuming someone else would take care of things. We've retreated into our homes and lost touch with our neighbors and our neighborhoods. It's that sense of community that I want to help bring back. It's what made Oneonta such a special place to live. People still talk about it, and we can bring it back together. It's going to start with you, the community, being given charge and assistance in improving the quality of life in your own neighborhoods. If you come up with a plan to build something, to create something, to add something that enhances our shared quality of life, the city will support you. At the next council meeting, we will be presenting the OCI program, short for Oneonta Community Initiative Program. It's the product of a team effort by the city administrator, the finance and community development department heads, the city clerk, and myself. And with the council's approval, we'll be able to start right away. I believe that this program will be game-changing. Our neighborhoods and our connections to our neighbors, that's where our quality of life makes its home. And at the next council meeting, we will take our first steps into a new future where an empowered community works with its government to make Oneonta the city we all want it to be. And those are my remarks. So with that, we will move to the consent agenda. And happily, we have all of these items inclusive in our consent agenda. And so we'll start with the number one, approval of minutes. Motion that the Common Council approves the minutes of the regular meeting held January 4th, 2021. That should be 2022. Approval of warrants. Number two, motion that the Common Council approves the warrants totaling $793,879.18, and that the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. Number three, from the Finance Human Resources Committee, motion that the Common Council approves the amendments to the 2022 part-time positions wage scale as presented. Number four, that as a result of the competitive request for proposals RFP process being solicited and accepted for community events programming, marketing, and promotion services for 2022 with an automatic annual renewal in one-year increments for up to a total of 5 years, the Common Council approves the purchasing agent's recommendation to award the bid to the most qualified bidder, Destination Oneonta, Oneonta, New York, in the amount of $60,000 for 2022, and for the amounts appropriated in the 2023-2026 adopted budgets, and further authorizes the mayor to execute a contract with Destination Oneonta pursuant to the RFP, subject to review by the city attorney. Number five, motion that as a result of the cooperative contract through Sourcewell, NYS OGS contract PC 52628, the Common Council approves the purchasing agent's recommendation to purchase a bucket truck in the amount of $140,464 from Altech Industries Incorporated of Birmingham, Alabama, and the council further authorizes this purchase to be funded from the General Fund Highway Equipment Reserve. Number six, that as a result of the cooperative contract through Houston Galveston Area Council HGAC, Houston, Texas, the Common Council authorizes the purchase of an ambulance from Bayhead Investments, Inc., DBA VCI Emergency Vehicle Specialist, Berlin, New Jersey, in the amount of $325,890.35, and the council further authorizes this purchase to be funded from the General Fund Restricted Donations Reserve in the amount of $153,861, and the balance of $172,029.35 to be funded by the Public Safety Reserve. Seven, that the Common Council authorizes the mayor to enter into a 2-year agreement with Walmart Supercenter in the town of Oneonta for the period January 1, 2022 to December 31, 2023 for the continued provision of Oneonta public transit bus services with a charge of $13,500 for 2022 and $15,000 for 2023, subject to review by the city attorney. Number eight, motion that the Common Council authorizes the mayor to enter into a 2-year agreement with Hannaford Food Store in the town of Oneonta for the period January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2023 for the continued provision of Oneonta public transit bus services with a charge of $7,008 for 2022 and $8,004 for 2023, subject to review by the city attorney. Number nine, that the Common Council authorizes the mayor to enter into a 3-year agreement with VF Oneonta LLC, owners of the Hannaford Plaza in the town of Oneonta for the period of January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2024, for the continued provision of Oneonta public transit bus services with a charge of $7,008 for 2022, $8,004 for 2023, and 2024, subject to review by the city attorney. 10, that the Common Council authorizes the mayor to enter into a 2-year agreement with the ARC at Town of Oneonta for the period of January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2023, for the continued provision of Oneonta public transit bus services with a charge of $2,004 for 2022, $2,508 for 2023, subject to review by the city attorney. 11, that the Common Council authorizes the mayor to enter into a 2-year agreement with the A.O. Fox Hospital, Oneonta, New York, for the period January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2023, for the continued provision of Oneonta public transit bus services with an annual charge of $6,504, subject to review by the city attorney. 12, that the Common Council appoints George Snyder to the position of maintenance worker effective January 19th, 2022, at a base salary of $30,517 CSEA grade 4, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. 13, that the Common Council authorizes the mayor to execute a memorandum of understanding between the city of Oneonta and the Oneonta Professional Firefighters Local 2408, 2408, let's go with that, IAFF, to accept a donation of 12 hours of sick time from all eligible employees for calendar year 2022, as opposed to the negotiated 24 hours as provided by CBA Article 16, Section 9. And we move on to motion number 14, which marked with an asterisk, having such various documentation attached. Motion 14, that the Common Council approves the following resolution. Authorizing the acquisition of a right-of-way and permanent easement for the City of Oneonta water system, high water service tanks and pipelines located on the Homer Folks Home property. Whereas the city has for many years maintained high water service tanks and pipelines, which are necessary and integral to the City of Oneonta water distribution system on and across a portion of the New York State-owned Homer Folks property located off West Street in the town of Oneonta, and whereas for many years the use and access of the site and pipelines for these water system components were authorized by written agreement between the City of Oneonta and the State of New York through the Office of General Services, and whereas it has been agreed that it would be in the mutual interest of both the city and the state of New York to permanently address the access, use, and maintenance rights of the city to the tanks and pipelines by means of the granting of an easement from the state of New York City, from the state of New York to the city of Oneonta for the purposes, and whereas there has been a survey of the current site showing the details of the easement to be granted, said survey being designated as OGS map number 2732 and dated July 22, 2021, showing a proposed easement comprising a total of 128,237 square feet or 2.9 acres. And whereas the state of New York has agreed to grant the city of Oneonta a permanent easement to those premises as shown on said survey in consideration of payment of the sum of $1. Now, therefore, it is hereby resolved that the mayor is authorized and empowered to apply for the conveyance of an easement in the subject property from the people of the state of New York for all as shown in the survey heretofore made of the premises and referred to herein for and in consideration of the sum of $1. And it is further resolved that this resolution shall constitute a formal request by the mayor for the conveyance of an easement in the property identified herein and for the purposes set forth herein. And it is further resolved that upon the granting of said request, that the mayor shall be further authorized to sign on behalf of the city of Oneonta any and all documents as may be either necessary or in furtherance of the acceptance, transfer, completion, or recording of this easement from the state of New York. And that concludes the items on the consent agenda. And do we have any motions to remove any items? Dave Risberger?
14.
14. Any other to be removed? John? I'm sorry, John, is it 4? Hang on.
Am I muted or unmuted?
You're good.
4.
4. Any other items to be removed for discussion uniquely? No. Okay. In that case, we have items 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Do we have a motion to approve? Len, followed by Mark Davies. And discussion? None. And so, Carrie, can we take the vote?
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu,
Aye.
Councilmember Carson,
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington,
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter,
Yes.
Councilmember Falco.
Yes.
Passes.
All right, that motion that all carries, and that takes us then to motion number 4 that was pulled. And John.
It's a question, and that is, have we received a report from Destination Oneonta as to what they've done in the last year? And do we have anything in the way of a plan for how they're going to approach using these funds in the future? Specifically, one question is whether the $60,000 is something that goes towards projects, another a specific amount that's going, for example, to the balloon festival and that type of thing, and versus just $60,000, not versus, but $60,000 just going into their operation. So do we know anything about what they've done and what they plan to do?
Greg, would you like to jump on this?
Sure. Yes, we do, John. They did provide everything that was asked of them as part of the RFP. If you remember, I believe it was sent to all council members as to what the scope of work that we were asking for was, so that they did provide a proposal that satisfied all of those requests. The RFP didn't ask for any information about what was completed in past years, just because this procurement was looking forward, and it was open competition to more than just Destination that could apply. So it was really looking at going forward. So I think our scope of work that we include is a little bit more specific. It did include some specific events that, based on our understanding of what the community is looking for, that we wanted to make sure continued. And it does include some metrics for tracking how these events, the Destination will be asked to provide to us, so we can have an idea of how they went and make an informed decision in the future as to what events to continue doing. Does that kind of answer your question? I
think so. And if the staff, if you specifically and others in the staff are satisfied, I take that with confidence.
Okay. Yeah, there were 4, being in an RFP. There were 4 staff members, not including myself, who reviewed the proposals that were submitted and scored them, and DO was ranked highest, and hence our recommendation to award the contract to them.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, then I believe I can simply ask for the vote at this point. Don't
A
need
motion
another
and a
motion to
second.
approve, right?
I'll make a
Need
motion.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm still learning. All
That's
right,
okay.
so we've got Scott, and we've followed Scott with Katie. So thank you for that. And then with that, Carrie, can we call the vote?
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Lepari Shu,
Aye.
Councilmember Carson,
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington,
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter,
Yes.
Councilmember Falco.
Yes.
Passes.
All right, so that carries. Very good. And we take ourselves now to motion number 14 that was pulled. And I believe, Dave, was that you? Dave?
I'll make the motion.
I'm sorry, that's on me then. Yes, I'm sorry. Dave, followed by Luke. Thank you. Motion for moving forward discussion.
So I guess my question is just more of a statement. I'm wondering how we've gotten away with not having an easement. I assumed that we already had an easement up at Homer Folks for this. Greg, maybe you could provide some light on this a little bit.
Well, perhaps city attorney might have more information than I do. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, we've the city entered into an original agreement, a contract between Homer Folks originally and the city in 1923, almost 100 years ago, and it went for like 25 years, and then it was totally ignored. And New York State was doing an inventory. The Office of General Services was doing an inventory, and they found this totally outdated contract. I mean, the contract said that we had the right to do it and laid everything out basically it's here, but it was just under contract. So they said, so in discussions with Greg, they said, listen, why don't we don't want to move our tanks, and we certainly don't want to move our pipes. And the state said, instead of having a contract going for 20 years and worrying about it, going out of, everybody forgetting about it because it's 20 years long, and why don't we just grant you an easement? We'll have it surveyed and we'll give it to you, and then you'll have a permanent easement. It'll be of record and it'll be there forever. So we said, hey, that's a great idea. So,
yeah.
So, and this happened last year, and New York State they had it surveyed and they're just getting around to doing it now. Because of the way that OGS works and that New York State handles the easements, they have all the work done, but New York State requires that we request of them that they give us an easement. So this is their arcane form for putting together a request, which will now go up to them. They will then prepare the documents to send down to us. And you'll see in the last resolution where I kind of put in an omnibus, anything that the mayor needs in order to get this thing done. Because we didn't want to get down all the way to the end and have another document that needed to be signed. And then say, well, New York State says, well, your resolution didn't authorize the mayor to do that, so you have to go through it again. So,
okay,
it's kind of a let's
thanks
get
for
it
giving
done.
the historical perspective.
Be careful what you ask for. You'll get a half an hour. You know that.
It's all right.
Good. Len.
When I was looking at the map earlier, I noticed that the one line is going through Harvard College. I'm assuming we have a right-of-way agreement with Harvard College.
I don't know the answer to that. I didn't know that it did that, but if it's there, it's been there for 100 years. So we probably have an easement, what's called an easement of necessity, but we can certainly check it.
I might have been misreading it, but when I was found, there's two lines, right, Greg?
Right.
One of the lines goes through Harvard College, according to that surveyed map.
Right, that's the line that goes basically parallel to Suncrest Terrace and then comes down to Suncrest Terrace. But to answer, I can't answer your question for certain that we have an easement on file. But as David said, we should, and we have that was installed, I believe, in the 60s. So it's more likely that we have something on file for that. We can check.
Okay. You said you're going to check.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other thoughts, comments, discussion? All right. Is that that's your cat? Okay, Luke, I thought you might have been raising your hand. Maybe your cat's raising its hand. I want to exclude your cat. So with that, we have a motion to approve, and we can go to vote.
Councilmember Murphy,
Sorry, aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger,
Yes, sorry about that.
Councilmember Leparishu,
Aye.
Councilmember Carson,
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington,
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter,
Yes.
Councilmember Falco.
Yes.
Passes.
Great. So with that, all of our motions have been approved, and we move on to additional business and or council discussion. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to bring up? No one. Okay. Carrie, have we any correspondence?
There is no correspondence.
There's no correspondence. Executive session. I don't need to call any executive session. Does anybody else? I see no one. So with that,
Mayor,
I'm sorry, John.
I thought there was going to be an executive, I noticed in your email, an executive session to discuss the forms and the process for
Right.
evaluating.
So those would wind up as a council discussion if we have them as discussion, as they are not personnel specific, so they wouldn't be in executive session. So we can have a conversation about that in council if you'd like.
I would love to. I had some questions about the form that was sent today.
Sure. Okay. Do we have Katie? Yeah, Katie's here. Let me lead this off though. So what we are talking about is a review form that has gone through a couple of modifications. The most recent having been the modification that took in all of the various bits of feedback that we've gotten from various council members. And it's our expectation, you should all have received from Katie a document sometime around 5:30 or so that is what we feel is most likely representative of the final version of that review document. However, we've also included the draft that preceded that so that you've got that to cross-reference to. Our expectation is that as that's seemingly inclusive of everybody's comments, that it's likely to be the document we use. However, if you have any additional changes that you'd like to have made, we'd like to ask that you let us know about those in the next 24 hours. And if not, then we're gonna, if there are, we'll make those modifications. If not, then we're gonna ask you to take a week and return those documents with your reviews to Katie. She'll compile, she'll average your scores. She'll include, most importantly, all of your narratives in the final document. That's about what I've got. Katie, anything you want to add to that? So did that answer questions, or did it just leave questions to be asked? Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
Sure.
Sorry.
So I saw the document and I appreciate that the red line document specifically, that kind of shows me what changes were requested. Some of them made a lot of sense to me, but some of them didn't. And so I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion with, I'm assuming those edits came from my peers here. And so I was hoping that I could just ask a couple of questions regarding the thought behind the elimination of a couple of things. There were, like I say, there were a couple of things where I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's not something that, you know, is really relevant to the position. But certain things like, you pull it up and I will make specific comments. So let's see. Yeah, oh, I don't want to go like line by line here, but I guess all of them I'm sort of going, let's see. Sorry, I'm reading and I'm probably like squinting at the camera really close. Yeah.
Before you get into reading them, let me give you kind of a quick overview, and Katie, jump in if Katie Becker, jump in if you feel like I'm misstating. What became clear in some conversations with council was the fact that there were things that, while they would make sense in a review of someone that you had an intimate connection to on a daily basis, you'd be able to see this, that, or something else about how they may be conducting themselves on the job. But from the perspective of 8 council members whose connection, and who are doing these reviews, whose connection to the principal is, as limited as it is, that those became less likely that you'd be able to provide a quality review. You'd be more guessing than anything else, and I think that eliminated any number of those different lines. And Katie Becker, if I'm wrong or if I misstated that, if you could just clear that up for me.
Sure. Actually, Mayor, there's really nothing to clear up. You're absolutely right. The main piece of feedback that I got from the council pertaining to the entire document, and it really encompasses most of the changes, was that, for the most part, a council member in the performance of their day-to-day responsibilities might not necessarily have the information that they would need in order to meaningfully evaluate the administrator based on some of these metrics. For example, one of the crossouts was under performance benchmark 3, solicits and incorporates the opinion and expertise of department heads and staff in decision making. So that might not necessarily be apparent to a council member, while it's certainly relevant and a characteristic that the council would certainly want the administrator to display. It might not be something that you would see, the inner workings of behind the scenes and be able to appropriately include feedback about that. Katie, there were additional under performance benchmark, I believe it was number 9. I added some in here with the thought being that in general, you would be able to, as council members, kind of evaluate similar criteria based on your observation of the city administrator during public meetings, including how the administrator kind of functions with department heads. Are they being a micromanager, or are they really being deferential to the professional staff? Are they inviting and including the appropriate staff members in various proceedings, things like that. So we were attempting to gauge the same type of feedback, but perhaps just in a more meaningfully appropriate way. And again, that was based on the concern expressed by one council member about, I'm not going to have the information that I need in order to be able to answer some of these questions appropriately. So that really was the main justification for every red line change you see in the document, was just me really reading through it carefully, trying to just take a bit of a different approach to looking at the questions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate that insight. I think that you said it, and it's true, is that some of the things, and sort of part of the reason why I was sort of going like, why are we cutting that out? And again, that mindset that you mentioned makes a lot of sense and really helps me understand the changes that were made. The thing is that, like, we still want those characteristics, like you said. So I'm wondering if there's any way, and obviously this is something where there's a timeline and we can't spend a year tweaking this document before we give the appropriate review. But I'm just wondering if there is a mechanism where we can kind of ensure that those qualities of management are being executed regularly, to have that understanding of the function of that position in City Hall. And it's not that specific verbiage, it's just sort of like taking out the expectation or the accountability around that expectation from the review process is kind of, I don't know that that's the answer. Do you know what I mean?
I guess just ask what suggestions you have on how to incorporate the type of feedback that you're looking for. I think this is exactly why we're going through this process, to get council feedback and input into the form. So whatever suggestions that you would have to capture exactly what it is you're looking for. I mean, of course, this is a council document. I'm just facilitating the process. So whatever we can do to capture that, of course, we'll include.
Cool. Well, I mean, thanks. It's something I would have to think about. I think just being sort of approached with the idea that those things were removed just this afternoon, kind of thinking about how we could still incorporate that into the conversation might take a little bit of thought, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
I would
So,
just make one comment that I don't know if I agree that they were removed as much as they were reallocated under different bullets that attempt to capture the same feedback just in a different format.
so when I was speaking a little bit, earlier, I suggested that if you could take 24 hours, given, Katie, Katie Lepari-Shu, your concern about the document and the need to spend a little bit more time thinking about how we might be able to incorporate, maybe a different take on, one line or another that might have been excised. If you'd like to take 48 hours, I do want to move this thing along. So if it's agreeable to council that we take 48 hours, a couple of days. So today is Tuesday, so that by the end of Thursday, that we have, or even Friday morning, that Katie Becker has got whatever modifications that you want to make, and then we'd be able to get that back out to you on Friday before the close of business, and then still let's just take a week. Luke, you were trying to
Yeah, I was going to say I'm supportive of that as long as it's not too short of a time crunch on Katie Bakker's schedule. It sounds good to me to have an extra day, but didn't want to do it at the expense of
right.
Katie.
Yeah, and we do want to move this along. I don't think it's fair to anybody, frankly, to have the process, extended beyond what's reasonable. But we also do want to do a good job, obviously. So if we are all agreeable to a timeline of a couple of days, let's get whatever modifications that you would suggest into Katie by Friday morning, early Friday morning, so that she has the day, and Katie, you and I will talk about it, obviously, that day in any case. And then we'll get the revised document out to everyone at the end of that day. And again, unless there's you guys can always send up a flare. If it's still not what you're looking for, you let us know, and we'll continue to modify the timeline. But the expectation that I have is that once everybody's got the final document, that, take no more than a week. I think that's more than reasonable for everyone to be able to input into that. And I think there are several members of council who have talked about how important the narrative part of this is. And so that will allow you to compose your thoughts and put that to paper as well, or digital paper as the case may be. So if that sounds agreeable to everyone, you can just kind of give me a thumbs up. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. All right. So it looks good. John, I got a thumbs down from you, John?
Not down. Just a couple of questions.
Sure.
The rankings now, there are 3: exceeding expectations, meets, and does not. As 8 people fill this out, there may be, who knows what that's going to be, but is the idea that this be averaged?
I think, not to speak for the council or Katie, but my thinking is that number grade will most likely be averaged. I think that makes sense. And that's why I think, again, the narrative is so important. So I think most
thank you for that. I don't want to have a justification for the narrative. I don't need that. Do you want to go on and talk about it and how important it is?
Just for a second. Thank you. So my sense of it is that most people will be looking at a little bit less than 2, a little bit more than 2 as we average things out, if it's a 1, 2, 3 kind of a scale. So again, John, you and I are obviously concurrence that the value of the narrative is implicit. So
now I also wonder what people's narratives will look like as Katie needs to figure out some sort of way of summarizing 8 narratives across these things.
Yeah, I don't think,
or whether they will all be placed in with a sort of cacophony of 8 opinions being narrated. And should Greg look at whatever the individual comments are, rather.
I'll listen to counsel here. I'll express my opinion quickly, is that 8 comments on any particular question are not too many comments. And there may be, I would not want to be the person, Katie Becker, who has to try to determine what the average is of all of those comments. So I think there's value in the comments being included.
So all the comments will be delivered as written. And
that's
in
my
other words,
opinion. It's your vote, but it's my opinion.
But in other words, eight documents will be presented to Greg.
May I, Mayor?
Luke.
My understanding of it, Council and Katie, is that probably the numbers will be aggregately scored, and at least in my evaluations in the past, I have been giving feedback in terms of written response from each person that was looking over me. It's actually, I've appreciated it. I'm not sure if our names necessarily, Luke has said this about Greg and John said this about Greg. I don't know if that's the way to go, but to have that anonymous, I mean, the feedback in terms of written, I don't think you can aggregate it so much, but it's helpful to have that written feedback from, I think, all 8 of us /9 if the mayor's involved.
So will we see each other's? For example, I am very satisfied with Greg. If there's anyone who's not, or anyone who feels that it's a godlike presence we have in his office, I'd like to know that. And I think Greg might like to know that if there's any trouble brewing with 1, 2, or even 3 dissatisfied people. What's that dissatisfaction, or the halo, the attempt to put a halo above Greg? What's that coming from? Because each of us is going to be making judgments. That's what this is about. And I'm just curious about how this aggregate of 8 people will play out. I don't know what anybody else is going to be saying, but I'd certainly like to know if anyone is dissatisfied, that whenever it happens, that it's a bit of an issue, because 8 people, that's all. I'm not a big fan of this process, but that's okay.
Sure. Dave Risberger.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, when everything is compiled, everything is going to be anonymous, but then we will get a review of the compilation, not saying who said what or anything like that. I'm assuming when that is all complete, we will have an executive session to have a discussion. And am I also correct, either Katie or Mark, that Greg will have an opportunity to ask follow-up questions of all of us in executive session after he sees his review?
I would imagine, but David Mertzig, because I've been already wrong about this once.
What's the question? Whether you're all going to get together or not?
In executive session. Go ahead, David.
I was assuming that after this compilation is all done and the review is presented to Greg, that we will meet in executive session to have a discussion. That way, Greg, if he has any questions to ask, he can do that. That typically happens in performance reviews, at least it does in mine. So is that something that we're planning on doing? That was my question.
The council is the determiner of what the mechanisms are for evaluation. And again, because this would be an evaluation of a particular person's performance, I think it would fall within the personnel exemption.
Good. So yes, David. Luke? No. Scott?
Right, just to, so when we fill this out, we're not putting our names on it at all. We're just going to submit it. Is that correct?
Katie?
I
um,
find,
sure.
I find that well, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
use words. If Greg is evaluating one of his people, it's not done anonymously. The 8 of us are evaluating Greg, and to hide with a certain sense of secrecy, I'm not concerned about what I might say.
No, John, you're going down a rabbit hole. That my question is just,
I am not going down a rabbit hole.
Or are we not putting our name on it? Because I got a follow-up question for it. And
Okay.
So can I just get the answer to that first so I can go on?
Katie?
God, if I could answer, I think as it stands, the form includes a space for the rater's name. So council members would individually include their name, and then it would be privately submitted to me.
Okay, because then my follow-up question is, and I don't know how anybody, feels about this or not. We're evaluating our city administrator, and then we're going to hand this into Katie, who reports directly to Greg. Is that putting her in a bad position? Should this go to maybe the director of the human finance and have him pilot and then submit it back out to us?
So Katie is.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, Scott?
Because we're filling this document out, and as it
Right.
stands right now, we're going to submit it to Katie. And I don't want to put her in a bad spot, but she's going to have all this stuff that goes against her direct boss, which is Greg, as the city administrator. So she's going to know every comment that gets made, everything, and how everything's filled out. Should that, instead of going to her after we fill this out, go to the finance and human resources chairman? He compiles it and then sends it back out so that it's all there.
Yes, Scott, my opinion, but I am very much of the opinion that Katie is a professional. She's our HR and personnel director, and this falls within the context of her job, and I don't have any doubt at all that she's exactly the right person to take care of that.
No, I'm not saying that, Mark. I'm just saying, does it put her in a bad spot? Because everywhere where I worked, where you're doing your direct supervisor, like when we do something and it's our direct supervisor, it goes off to somebody that doesn't report to that person so that they're not put in a bad position.
Katie, can you respond to that? Katie Becker.
I think that my response would be that the city entrusts me in my professional capacity to handle a variety of sensitive matters with ethicality and tact. I would personally not feel put in the middle to compile a document. But if there is not enough faith in my professional integrity to do the process justice, then I would prefer that the task reside elsewhere.
It's nothing about faith or integrity. It's just, I just want to know if it felt like you were going to get put in a bad position because you report directly to Greg, or would Greg feel bad, or vice versa? Would it be that he would know that somebody else would know underneath him what the information is before we get it to him? So it has nothing to do with faith or integrity or trust. It's just a generalized question of not putting people in bad positions.
We appreciate that, Scott. Dave Risberger.
Yeah. Well, first, I think Scott brings up a good question. I hadn't thought of that. So while this whole discussion was going on, I was thinking about it. And so I appreciate what Scott is saying, and I appreciate his concerns. In my opinion, I look at this as it's a job. Whoever does this, their job is simply to compile what's there. But as far as the confidentiality piece, I think for me, Scott and Mark and Katie or everybody here. For me, I think that since there's so much confidential information that already goes through Katie's office because it is the HR office, I think I feel comfortable with this. I think we just have to take a leap of faith, like we would with any other employee of the city with confidential information, and that goes through that same office. So ultimately, she's not going to be making any decision here. It's our decision. It's just her job to compile what we give her. So that's just my thought on it. But I appreciate Scott's concern because I hadn't thought of that before.
Anybody else that has a thought on this process?
If I may,
Luke.
Mayor?
Luke.
Yes. So I look forward to evaluating Greg. I think it's I feel kind of I mean I know this is part. It's a lot of talk with him just sitting here in the third person. So I appreciate Greg kind of putting up with it. I will say that I am by no means a master in HR, and I trust Katie Bucker wholeheartedly. I think she'll do a fine job. I have no reservations. She's a professional. It's part of what we pay her for. So I think we're in good hands here.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. All right, so where we have gotten to now in this process, I'm going to recap and you guys will tell me if I'm off base, is we are going to take a couple of days to review the document that's been presented to everyone in their mailboxes. If you have any modifications that you'd like to have made to it, we're going to ask you to make certain that you get those to Katie Becker by Friday morning. Earlier is better than later on Friday. By the end of Friday, Katie and I will have devised what we feel is a document that's responsive to any changes that have been offered. We'll send that back out to you. We're going to look to see that, barring somebody sending up a flare, that there's still an issue that they need to have resolved, in which case we'll look at potentially calling a special session of council together to do that. We will get this resolved, and you will have basically 7 days to then return your reviews signed. We know who they come from. There's a line for that. And we will then compile them and you'll have a document to review prior to our sitting down with Greg. That will happen in an executive session. Does that sound about right? Good. Okay. So I believe we've resolved that, and that takes me to my final sheet, which there it is. So executive session is not needed. And so folks, unless there's anything else that you'd like to share from council around any other item at all, I'm going to say I've got a gavel and I know how to use it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.